so Matt teaches political science at the University of Michigan, and wanted to bring him in on this part of the discussion because he has recently written an article that's gotten a lot of pickup in Commonweal about Aleksandr Dugin called "Just Call It Fascism." Aleksandr Dugin's fraudulent third way. And I think there's like a good transition here into the John Stuart Mill stuff we're going to be talking about in a few minutes because of that exact point that Kuba just made, that in a certain way, like the most fundamental thing that all of these guys, Rod Dreher, Aleksandr Dugin, reject about liberalism is the idea that you should be, that you can just kind of use reason to convince everybody to live, to adopt your program. I mean, like in some ways they kind of have to reject that. Otherwise, why do you need the state to impose your vision of the good life? Why not just convince people that it would be better to live that way?
Also, you set your own position up for refutation through reason.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that you can see elements of this in the reactionary tradition going all the way back to somebody like Joseph de Maistre, who was a profound influence on a variety of fascist thinkers, most notably Ebola, but also Schmidt. I mean, de Maistre famously said that philosophy is fundamentally a destructive force because it submits all forms of authority to criticism, and not just any kind of criticism, the criticism of all. And this is absolutely corrosive and needs to be rejected prima facie offhand without any kind of toleration. Now,
I remember de Maistre had said that civilization stemmed from three sources, a kind of reflective trinity, Pope, King, and Executioner. And that none of them are philosophers, none of them are agents of reason.
No, absolutely. And what's interesting is the elective affinity draws between all three of these, not just at the functional, but at the conceptual level, because he says the thing about the executioner is that he doesn't just scare people. He attaches a kind of sublime quality onto authority because he has power over life and death in the same way that God has power over life and death. And attaching that to authority, or attaching that to power, transforms that very effectively into authority. And I think that you see new iterations of that in Duginism. One of the things that really is cheap about Duginism, and there's a lot of things that are cheap about Duginism, is the way that he follows through with a lot of classical fascists and try to reappropriate in this very trashy way certain kind of left-wing ideas and to reinterpret them in reactionary form, to give his philosophy a kind of countercultural gloss to it. But once you scratch just a little bit beneath the surface, you realize that it's just same old, same old. Probably one of the most representative examples of this I can think of is in his book on irrationalism and in the Fourth Political Theory. He talks about how Russia isn't going to have a normal democracy. It's not going to have a banal representative democracy like the West. They're going to have a better kind of democracy. It's not one where the people will have any say in how they're governed because, the superior ones will get to make decisions for them. But it is still a democracy, according to him, because those superior ones know what the people's destiny ultimately is, and they will be able to compel people to commit in some bizarre way authentically to that destiny. And since they're all participating in it, it's still a kind of narrowed, you know what I mean? And it's a really...
Which I've got to say sounds uncomfortably like, for anybody who knows anything about Maoism, that sounds uncomfortably like the mass line, right? That the party, listens to the people and it tells them, and it tells them what they need and, all that stuff. And, and there's the same sort of weird quasi pretension to democracy there.
Oh, absolutely. Right. It's just the difference is that Maoism at least had a kind of egalitarian core that would be more consistent, at least theoretically, with the kind of democratic ethos, right? That participation from everybody is something to be valued. What's really fascinating about Duginism and fascist reappropriations of democracy going all the way back to Schmidt is precisely how little interest they have in what the actual people who are being governed have to say, or even what they do with their lives. There's this kind of theoretical resolution of the problem of representation and participation by saying that, look, through attaching the general will or the destiny of the people to a singular figure or set of figures, and saying that they embody this, we've solved the riddle for all time, as it were. But I can't think of any single person who would want to live in any kind of society like that, especially if they were a philosopher like Dugin is, who talks a great deal about authenticity coming from Heidegger, right? Because I can't imagine a society that is less authentic than one where the so-called superior people dictate the destiny of those below them, and they have absolutely no choice but to abide by that, which includes sending, I should point out again, 65-year-olds to die in the Donbass because Putin wants to annex a couple of provinces in the eastern part of the Ukraine.
And I think that it's useful to go back to what we were talking about France and the liberal variant of attempting to substantiate popular sovereignty, because that's what this obfuscation comes down to. After the French Revolution, the concept of popular sovereignty had such legitimacy that it was very difficult to have any political program that began from a position of, well, who cares what the people think? We're just going to force them to obey, and that's fine. It turns out that it's difficult to have any competitiveness in mass politics if you're that upfront about your authoritarianism. But so they launder it, right? You redefine what the people are. They're no longer actual populations, actual individuals summed up. And the French liberals, and I realize that I'm becoming like the heel that will constantly stand up for liberal nationalism. But in providing a common language and a common civic framework for France, the idea was not to impose that leadership over the people and tell them what they want, but actually to empower the actual people to be able to organize, to be able to learn, and to be able to participate in the collective work of popular sovereignty. I'm not saying it succeeded, but it's certainly not the same as we are a nation collectively together because Father Putin or Chairman Mao all hold our futures in the palm of their hands, and their hearts burn with love for all the sons of the soil.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, if you think about, and there is this very funny, to me at least, line in the article where you're talking about this book by Michael Millerman, who I think is a little bit squirrely about this, but who certainly seems to be a fan. And it's called Inside Putin's Brain, about Aleksandr Dugin. And he says at the conclusion of Inside Putin's Brain, Millerman excuses his lack of engagement with the practical implications of Duginism, including Dugin's support for the war in Ukraine, on the strange grounds that, quote, nothing Dugin could say about oil prices, unquote, would be as important as his commitment to the, quote, big questions and giving them their due, unquote. In short, discussing the real-world implications of Dugin's ideas would besmirch his value as his dignity as a philosopher, which, you know, it is very convenient, but I mean, it does go to the point that Kuba just made, because on a really, you know, basic level, if you are going to take this line that like, oh, well, what we're doing is a kind of, you know, it's like a strange sort of democracy, but it's a kind of democracy. It counts, you know, because ultimately the, you know, this sort of essence of the people, their destiny is in, you know, this project of national greatness. Then like that sounds so much better if you can spend all of your time in this sort of like grandiose, like, you know, Nietzschean aphorism mode, than if you're actually talking about the specific stuff that it means in practice, which would actually, I think, be fairly difficult to get, democratic buy-in for in a deliberative process. Like, hey, how do you guys feel about having the economy fall apart and having your son have to die in what may turn out to be a years-long struggle to determine exactly where the boundary is between the Russian-controlled part of the Donbass and the Ukrainian part?
But it's okay, because whatever you think, Vladimir Putin goes into a mystical grove and speaks to a magic goldfish that lives in a blessed pond, which tells him what the true fate and destiny of Russia are.
Yeah, and if that goldfish won't be really talkative that day, don't worry, because Dugin will go commune with being itself, and being will tell him that what we need to do is conscript more 60-year-olds to go fight in the Donbass, right? It's weird how being almost always seems to be telling him that, but absolutely. And I should point out that what I thought you said, Kuba, was really insightful when you referred to how it is that far-right thinkers will launder left-wing ideas by essentially deflating them of any kind of material substance that would have egalitarian implications, but giving them their kind of most reactionary dispositions and arguments a kind of progressive makeover in the most superficial way. And you can go back to even, again, somebody like Joseph de Maistre, who made exactly the same kind of arguments in some of his more generous moments, where he says, look, all these kind of progressive French revolutionaries are talking about how it is that the people need to participate in their government. But I'm telling you that the people are most elevated by participating in a monarchy, because then they share in part in the splendor of the monarchy. They don't get to tell it what to do, and they have to do what it says, but they participate in its splendor regardless, right?
Well, and the thing is, the reason that there's a certain longevity to these reactionary thinkers, and I'm thinking of de Maistre, especially, but Nietzsche as well, Carl Schmitt, is that they do point to a reality that leftists need to reckon with, which is, if we believe that reason is a sufficient basis for a humane and effective ordering of the world, which I do, then what about all of the irrationality that surrounds us all the time? And it's dangerous to gloss over it or disregard it, or say that it'll be solved at once the revolution will take care of it, or any of those other hand-waving exercises. When you talk about the splendor, participating in the splendor of the monarchy, at this point, if you were to destroy News Corp and eliminate the sort of conservative biases in British media, the fixation on the royal family would persist. It's not even limited to the UK. And where there are no royal families, then publics, media audiences invent them. And we were talking earlier about the appeal for young disaffected men for projects of self-immolation, self-destruction, the romance of blood and violence. These are real. The reactionaries don't invent them. They are not easily solved or wished away. I believe that they are soluble through human reason, but they remain conditions of individual and collective life that we haven't sufficiently grappled with.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.